The massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers opened with a sound like thunder. Ambassador Thrix floated through them, his forearms shaking with anger. The Altarian's blue skin had turned almost purple, a sign that every species in the galaxy knew meant trouble. Emergency session now. Thrix's voice echoed through the vast chamber. His translator device worked overtime to convert his clicks and whistles into something the other species could understand. The humans have gone too far this time. One by one, representatives from 200 different worlds took their places in the circular chamber. The room itself was a marvel of engineering, floating in space between 3 stars. Its walls were made of transparent aluminum, offering a view of the cosmos that reminded everyone of how vast the galaxy was, and how much of it the Council was supposed to control. The Council speaker, an ancient being from the void, touched his ceremonial staff to the floor 3 times. The sound rang out like a bell, bringing silence to the chamber. His many eyes, each one looking in a different direction, somehow managed to look at everyone at once. Ambassador Thrix of the Altarian hegemony has called this emergency session, the speaker announced. The matter concerns humanity and their recent activities in the Kepler 442 system. A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. The Kepler 442 system was supposed to be off limits. The Council had marked it as a protected zone 50 years ago, saving it for 3 species that were still learning to use basic tools. It was meant to be their future home when they developed space travel in a few thousand years. Thrix moved to the center of the chamber. Above him, holographic images appeared showing 3 planets. Each one was covered in the unmistakable signs of terraforming. Giant machines could be seen changing the atmosphere. Cities were already growing on the surface. Ships with the blue and green flag of Earth moved between the worlds. 3 weeks ago, Thrix began, human colony ships entered the Kepler 442 system. They ignored all warning beacons. They dismissed our protection markers. And now, as you can see, they have already begun changing 3 planets to suit their needs. The chamber erupted in angry voices. The Zafrani ambassador's feathers turned bright red. The crystalline form of the Prism delegate vibrated with a high-pitched sound that meant extreme displeasure. Even the usually calm water beings from Aquarios bubbled with agitation. "This cannot stand," declared Ambassador Korvac of the warrior clans. His massive frame rose from his seat, muscles rippling under his scaled skin. "The humans have ignored Council law for the last time. We must act." The speaker raised his staff again, bringing order. "A vote will be taken. All in favor of summoning Earth's representative for immediate negotiation regarding territorial boundaries." Every single member raised their hand, tentacle, or energy field in agreement. It was the first unanimous vote the Council had seen in 300 years. "The motion passes," the speaker announced. "Summon Ambassador Chen of Earth immediately." It took 2 hours for the human ambassador to arrive. During that time, the Council members talked among themselves, planning what they would say. How they would make the humans understand that their expansion had to stop. That there were rules in the galaxy and everyone had to follow them. When the doors opened again, a single human walked in. Ambassador Sarah Chen was small by galactic standards, standing barely 2 meters tall. She wore a simple black suit with Earth's flag on her shoulder. No ceremonial robes, no display of power, no enhancement suit to make her appear larger. Just a human woman with short black hair and brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She walked to the center of the chamber without waiting to be invited. In her hand was a data pad that she didn't bother to look at. "Ambassador Chen," the speaker began, his voice carrying the weight of 200 worlds. "You have been summoned here to answer for humanity's illegal colonization of the Kepler 442 system. This system was designated as a protected zone by this council. Your people have violated galactic law." Chen stood still, her face showing no emotion. She waited for the speaker to finish. "The council demands immediate cessation of all terraforming activities. Your colonists must withdraw within 1 solar rotation. The system must be returned to its original state. These are not requests, Ambassador. These are requirements for humanity to remain a member of the galactic community." The entire chamber watched Chen, waiting for her response. Some expected her to argue. Others thought she might try to bargain. A few wondered if she would apologize and beg for more time. Chen looked up at the speaker, then slowly turned in a circle to look at every single member of the council. When she had completed her rotation, she spoke a single word. "No." The translator systems actually sparked as if they couldn't believe what they had just processed. Several ambassadors asked their devices to repeat the translation, certain there had been an error. No, the speaker's many eyes all focused on Chen at once. Perhaps you do not understand the situation, Ambassador. This is not a negotiation. The Council has made its decision. I understand perfectly, Chen replied. Her voice was calm, like she was discussing the weather. Earth does not recognize the Council's authority over systems we have claimed. We will not remove our colonists. We will not stop the terraforming. We will not abandon worlds where human children have already been born. The chamber exploded in chaos. Ambassadors shouted in 100 different languages. Some stood up, others gestured wildly. The noise was deafening. Chen turned to leave. You cannot simply walk away. Thrix floated in front of her, blocking her path. This is the Galactic Council. We represent 200 civilized worlds. You are just one species. Chen looked up at the much larger alien. Yes, we are just one species. A species that does not negotiate from a position of weakness. She held up her datapad and tossed it onto the central podium. That contains our counterproposal. We suggest you read it carefully. She stepped around Thrix and walked toward the door. The Council security, uncertain what to do, looked to the speaker for guidance. He gestured for them to let her pass. At the door, Chen turned back one more time. You have 48 Earth hours to respond to our proposal. After that, we will assume you have chosen not to pursue diplomatic solutions. The doors closed behind her with a soft hiss. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then slowly, Thrix floated over to the datapad Chen had left behind. His 4 hands shook slightly as he picked it up and activated it. As he read, his blue skin went pale, then dark, then pale again. What does it say? Demanded Korvac. Thrix's voice was barely a whisper when he replied. They want the Council to recognize human sovereignty over all territories they have settled. All of them. Not just Kepler 442, but every single world they've claimed in the last 100 years. That's absurd. The PRISM delegates' form flickered with indignation. That would mean recognizing their claim to over 300 systems. There's more, Thrix continued reading. They want formal recognition that Council law does not apply to human space. They want the right to defend any species that requests their protection, and they want a seat on the Council's Security Committee. The speaker's ancient face showed emotion for the first time in centuries. It looked like confusion mixed with something else. Fear, perhaps? They cannot be serious, he said slowly. No species has ever made such demands. Look at the last page, Thrix said, his voice hollow. The speaker took the pad and read the final words. It was a simple statement signed by someone called Admiral Kozlov. The age of asking permission is over. Humanity will take its place in the galaxy, with or without the Council's approval. We hope you choose wisdom over conflict. The chamber fell silent. Outside the transparent walls, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the crisis brewing below. For the first time in its 1,000-year history, the Galactic Council had encountered a species that simply said no, and they had no idea what to do about it. The Council chamber had not emptied in 36 hours. Food dispensers worked overtime as representatives from 200 worlds argued, debated, and shouted at each other. The human refusal to negotiate had broken something fundamental in their understanding of how the galaxy worked. Ambassador Korvac slammed his scaled fist on the table for the 100th time. We are the Galactic Council. We have maintained order for 1,000 years. One primitive species cannot simply ignore us. Primitive? The Zephrani ambassador's feathers rustled with amusement. The humans reached space only 300 years after splitting the atom. It took my people 3,000 years to make the same journey. Perhaps we should reconsider who is primitive. That is exactly the problem, interrupted the crystalline form of Ambassador Glix from the Prism Collective. They advance too quickly. They adapt too fast. Look at this report from my intelligence network. The holographic display in the center of the chamber came to life. It showed images of massive construction projects around human colonies, defense platforms the size of small moons, shipyards that seemed to build vessels using methods the Council's scientists couldn't fully understand. This is Project Fortress, Glix continued. The humans have been building these for 20 years, self-replicating defense platforms that can rebuild themselves even if destroyed. They learn from every attack and share that knowledge instantly across their entire network. The speaker's many eyes studied the images carefully. How many of these platforms exist? We don't know, Glix admitted. At least 10,000. Possibly twice that. They're building them faster than we can count them. A nervous whisper ran through the chamber. The Altarian hegemony, the Council's strongest military power, had only 8,000 defense stations across their entire empire. "There's something else you all need to see," said a small voice from the back of the chamber. It was Ambassador Yip from the Collective Minds, a race of telepathic beings who rarely spoke aloud. "We've been analyzing human history. Their pattern of conflict resolution is unusual." The display changed to show a timeline of human conflicts since they joined the galactic community. First contact with the savage hordes. Year 2384, Yip read. The hordes attacked 3 human colonies without warning. Result, the entire horde fleet was destroyed. Humans suffered 0 ship losses. The timeline continued. Border dispute with the Kellax Empire, year 2401. The Kellax demanded mining rights to human systems. When refused, they sent a war fleet. Result, the Kellax fleet was disabled and sent home. Every ship's weapon system was permanently destroyed by something the humans called a virus. The Kellax Empire collapsed within 5 years. More and more conflicts appeared on the screen. The pattern was always the same. Someone attacked the humans or made demands. The humans won, usually without firing more than a few shots. They never pursued. They never conquered. They just won and went back to whatever they were doing before. In 117 conflicts, Yip concluded, the humans have never started a war, and they have never lost one. The chamber fell silent. Even Korvac seemed subdued. "Perhaps," suggested the ancient voice of Elder Thum from the Grey Wanderers, "we should try economic pressure. Surely they need trade with Council worlds." The speaker nodded slowly. "An interesting proposal. Ambassador Zix, what is the current trade situation with Earth and her colonies?" Zix, whose species ran most of the galaxy's trading networks, pulled up economic data. As the numbers appeared, his 4 eyes widened in surprise. "This can't be right," he muttered, checking again. "According to this, human trade with Council worlds has decreased by 80% in the last 10 years. Then the sanctions are already working." Korvac said triumphantly. "No," Zix said slowly. "They're not buying less. They're trading with non-Council species. The free traders, the independent miners, even the nomad fleets. They've created an entire parallel economy that doesn't need us at all." The display showed trade routes crisscrossing the galaxy, all avoiding Council space entirely. Goods, technology, and resources flowed between human colonies and 100 small civilizations that the Council had always ignored. "When did this happen?" the speaker demanded. "Gradually, over 20 years, Zix replied. "It's actually quite brilliant. They never announced it, never made it obvious. They just slowly shifted their trade partnerships. Now they're completely self-sufficient." Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring through the chamber. The security chief, a 6-armed creature from the warrior worlds, rushed to the speaker's platform. "Your Eminence," he said urgently, "Admiral Kozlov of the Human Colonial Navy is broadcasting on all channels." "Put it through," the speaker ordered. The holographic display shifted to show a human male in a dark blue uniform. Admiral Kozlov had gray hair, sharp blue eyes, and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Behind him was the bridge of what appeared to be a warship, though its design was unlike anything in the Council's databases. "Members of the Galactic Council," Kozlov began, his voice carrying the tone of someone who was used to being obeyed. "I am transmitting this message to clarify humanity's position regarding your recent attempts at discussion." He paused, seeming to look directly at each ambassador despite being a recording. "Effective immediately, any non-human vessel that approaches within 1 light-year of any human colony will be considered hostile. You will have 1 warning to change course. If you do not comply, your ship will be disabled and towed to the nearest non-human system." The image shifted to show a star map with hundreds of red zones marking human territory. "These boundaries are non-negotiable. We have no interest in your wars, your politics, or your laws. Stay away from us and we will stay away from you," Korvac roared in fury. "This is a declaration of war." But Kozlov wasn't finished. "To those species currently suffering under Council sanctions or threats, know this. Any who seek humanity's protection will receive it. We do not require payment. We do not demand servitude. We only require that you respect the sovereignty of others as we respect yours." The transmission ended, replaced by a simple image of Earth's flag with words written below it in every known language. "Don't tread on me." The chamber erupted in chaos again. Several smaller species ambassadors were already quietly activating their communication devices, no doubt reporting back to their governments about the human offer of protection. We must respond to this provocation, Thrix insisted. The Altarian hegemony proposes a joint fleet action, a show of force to remind the humans of their place. No! The voice came from Ambassador Heck of the Vorthan Empire, one of the Council's most aggressive military powers. His reptilian face was pale, something his species only showed when terrified. What do you mean, no? Korvac demanded. Heck's clawed hands shook as he activated his own display. Because we already tried. 3 days ago, my government sent a fleet to Mars to conduct a military exercise. We wanted to see if the humans were bluffing. The display showed 12 Vorthan battleships, each one capable of destroying a small moon, approaching Mars. Then suddenly they stopped moving. What happened? The speaker asked quietly. We don't know, Heck admitted. One moment they were at full power. The next, everything shut down. Engines, weapons, life support, everything. The ships just floated there, completely helpless. The recording continued. Small human vessels approached the dead fleet, attached towing cables, and slowly pulled them away from Mars. They towed our battleships to the edge of the solar system, Heck continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Then everything turned back on. No explanation, no communication. Just a single message on every screen. You were warned. How? Glix demanded. How could they disable an entire fleet without firing a shot? We've had our best scientists studying the ships for days, Heck replied. They can't find anything wrong. No damage, no viruses in our computers, nothing. It's like the ships just decided to stop working. The chamber fell silent again. The most powerful military forces in the galaxy were facing an enemy that didn't even need to fight them to win. Perhaps, suggested Elder Thum carefully, we should consider that the humans are not actually our enemy. They haven't attacked anyone. They're just refusing to be controlled. That's exactly what makes them dangerous, Thrix argued. If one species can ignore council law, others will follow. Our entire system will collapse. As if to underscore his point, a message arrived for the speaker. He read it, and his ancient face grew even older. The Free Traders Alliance has just announced a mutual defense pact with humanity, he said quietly. The independent miners have joined them. So have the nomad fleets. The math was simple and terrifying. Together with their new allies, the humans now controlled nearly a third of the galaxy's resources. And they had done it without conquering a single world or fighting a single real battle. The panic that gripped the council was no longer about one species refusing to negotiate. It was about the realization that humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. They hadn't just said no to the council. They had made the council irrelevant. Deep beneath the council chambers, in a vault that hadn't been opened in 500 years, the speaker stood before an ancient door. His many eyes showed exhaustion but also determination. Behind him, the oldest members of the council waited in silence. Are you certain about this? Elder Thum asked, his gray form shifting nervously. The predecessor's archive was sealed for a reason. We have no choice, the speaker replied. The humans are unlike anything we've faced. Perhaps the answer lies in the past. The door opened with a groan of protest, revealing a chamber filled with crystalline storage devices that glowed with soft blue light. These were the records of the predecessors, the mysterious race that had created the council before vanishing into the void. The speaker touched the central crystal, and immediately, information flooded into the chamber's holographic displays, ancient text in languages that their translators struggled to decode. Star maps showing the galaxy as it was millennia ago, and then something that made every being in the room freeze, a file marked with symbols that translated roughly to species assessment, Earth, classification, aberrant. They knew about humans. Clix's crystalline form vibrated with shock. But that's impossible. This archive is over 3,000 years old. Humans had barely discovered fire then. The speaker activated the file. A holographic image appeared showing Earth as it was in ancient times. But there were energy readings, measurements, observations that seemed impossibly detailed. The predecessor's report began to scroll across the display. Species 347b, locally known as humans, discovered on third planet of System G2884. Initial assessment indicates unusual psychological and social development patterns. Unlike all other observed sapient species, humans demonstrate simultaneous capacity for extreme cooperation and extreme independence. This paradox makes standard predictive models ineffective. Elder Thum read aloud, his voice growing more concerned with each word. Humans show abnormal resistance to authority structures that they do not create themselves. They will die rather than submit to what they perceive as unjust rule, yet will sacrifice themselves willingly for leaders they choose. This trait appears to be genetic rather than cultural. The file continued with observations that became increasingly alarming. Warning: humans possess unusual pattern recognition abilities that allow them to understand and replicate technologies after minimal exposure. They show no respect for the traditional pace of development. Recommend isolation until species either destroys itself or evolves past aggressive tendencies. But there's more, the speaker said, his voice hollow. He scrolled to a section marked with danger symbols. Final assessment. Human neural structure allows for something we have termed spite logic. They will accept personal loss to ensure that an enemy suffers greater loss. They will choose mutual destruction over subjugation. Most critically, they appear to take satisfaction from this. No other species in our database demonstrates this trait to such an extreme degree. The predecessors feared them, Ambassador Yip said quietly. That's why Earth was never invited to join the early council. They deliberately excluded humans. The speaker found another file, this one showing a conversation between predecessor administrators. The humans must never know they were watched. If they discover they were judged and found wanting, their spite logic will activate on a species-wide scale. They will not seek to join the galactic community. They will seek to prove it wrong, Korvac laughed bitterly. Well, they certainly failed at that. The humans know now. Wait, Glick said suddenly. Look at this notation. The predecessors ran predictive models on human development. The display showed probability calculations that made no sense at first. Then the pattern became clear. The predecessors had tried to predict when humans would reach space, when they would discover faster than light travel, when they would make first contact. They had been wrong about everything. Every single prediction showed humans taking at least 1,000 years longer than they actually had. The predecessors had assumed humans would develop like every other species, slowly, carefully, making sure each step was perfect before moving to the next. They didn't account for what humans call good enough engineering, Zik said, reading from a current human technical manual he had pulled up for comparison. Humans don't wait for perfect solutions. They build something that works, use it immediately, and improve it as they go. Look at this, the speaker said, finding a final file marked extinction probability. The file showed that the predecessors had calculated a 93% chance that humans would destroy themselves with nuclear weapons, an 87% chance they would poison their own planet, a 79% chance they would die from diseases they created themselves. But they survived all of it, Elder Thum observed. Every catastrophe that should have ended them just made them more determined. Suddenly, every display in the archive flashed red. A new file appeared, one that hadn't been there moments before. It was labeled simply Current Analysis. That's impossible, the speaker said. This archive has been sealed for centuries. The file opened anyway. It showed real-time data about human colonies, their technology, their alliances, information that was being updated as they watched. Then a message appeared, written in perfect galactic standard. Hello, Council. We've been monitoring this archive since you entered. Interesting reading, isn't it? The beings in the archive room spun around looking for intruders. There was no one there. The message continued. The predecessors were right about one thing. We don't like being judged by those who never gave us a chance, but they were wrong about something important. We don't want to destroy the galactic community. We want to improve it. How are they doing this? Glix demanded, his form flickering with panic. The same way we disabled the Vorthon fleet, the message replied, apparently responding to the spoken question. The same way we've been monitoring your communications for the past 50 years. Quantum entanglement technology. Your scientists say it's impossible to use for communication. We disagreed. The speaker found his voice. What do you want? We want what we've always wanted. To be left alone to develop in our own way. To explore the galaxy without asking permission. To help those who want our help. To defend ourselves against those who would control us. The displays changed, showing human colonies across the galaxy. Each one was different, adapted to its environment in ways the Council had never considered. desert worlds with cities that moved with the sand, water worlds with floating nations, even a colony inside an asteroid field with millions of people living in connected space stations. Your council demands conformity, the message continued. Every species must follow the same path, the same rules, the same limitations. We reject that. Diversity is strength. Different approaches lead to different solutions. But without rules, there is chaos. The speaker argued to the empty air. Is there? Look at our space. Crime is lower than in council territory. Our colonies cooperate without being forced. Our allies choose to work with us because we respect their sovereignty. Perhaps your chaos is just freedom by another name. The displays showed statistics that the council couldn't dispute. Human space was peaceful. Their allies were prospering. Races that had been stagnant for centuries under council rule were suddenly advancing, developing new technologies, exploring new systems. We studied your history, the message said. Every empire that tried to control too much eventually fell. The predecessors knew this. That's why they disappeared. They realized that forcing unity creates weakness, not strength. Elder Thum spoke up. If you've been monitoring us, then you know there are those on the council who want war. Yes, and we're prepared for it. But we would prefer a different path. The displays showed something new. Plans for trade routes that connected council space and human space. Technology exchanges that would benefit everyone. Medical advances that humans had developed that could cure diseases that had plagued some species for millennia. We don't want to be your enemies, the message said, but we will never be your subjects. The question is whether the council can accept the existence of a peer, not a subordinate. The archive suddenly went dark, then returned to normal. The message was gone. The real-time data had vanished. But the predecessor files remained, a reminder of how long this moment had been coming. The beings in the archive stood in silence for a long moment. Then the speaker turned to the others. We must tell the full council what we've learned, he said heavily. The humans aren't refusing to negotiate because they're aggressive. They're refusing because they know our entire system is built on a lie. The lie that one way is the right way for everyone. The others won't accept this, Korvac warned. Too many have too much invested in the current system. Then the council will fall, Elder Thum said simply. The humans have given us a choice. Evolve or become irrelevant, just as the predecessors chose irrelevance rather than change. As they filed out of the archive, none of them noticed the small device attached to one of the crystals. It looked like nothing more than a speck of dust. But it was recording everything, transmitting it all back to Earth. In a room thousands of light years away, Ambassador Chen watched the feed and smiled. The council was beginning to understand. The council chamber was divided like never before. On one side, 43 species had formed what they called the Order faction, demanding immediate military action against humanity. On the other, 38 species formed the Peace faction, arguing for acceptance of human terms. The remaining members sat in the middle, undecided, frightened, watching their 1,000-year-old institution tear itself apart. Ambassador Korvac stood at the center of the Order faction, his scaled skin gleaming under the chamber's lights. The humans have infiltrated our most sacred archives. They mock our authority. Every moment we delay, they grow stronger. And every moment we threaten them, more species join their cause. Elder Thum countered from the Peace faction's side. 7 more worlds requested human protection yesterday alone. The Gentle Gardens, who haven't fought a war in 10,000 years, are building weapons because they fear what we might do. The speaker stood at his podium, trying to maintain order, but his control was slipping. His many eyes showed the strain of the past week. The council that had ruled the galaxy for a millennium was crumbling, and everyone knew it. Suddenly, the chamber doors burst open. Ambassador Chen walked in uninvited and unannounced. She wasn't alone. Behind her walked representatives from 17 non-council species. The free traders, the nomad fleets, the independent miners, and others who had lived on the edges of council space, ignored and dismissed for centuries. You cannot be here, Thrix protested, his blue skin flushing purple. This is a closed session. Chen smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. According to council law, any species affected by council decisions has the right to witness deliberations. These species are very affected by your talk of war. She walked to the center of the chamber, the same spot where she had stood a week ago. But this time she wasn't alone. This time she had allies. We're here to deliver humanity's final position, Chen announced. You have a choice. Accept that the galaxy is big enough for different systems of government, or watch as your council becomes nothing more than a historical footnote. You dare threaten us? Korvac roared, stepping forward. His warrior's instincts were screaming at him to attack, but something in Chen's eyes made him pause. We don't make threats, Chen replied calmly. We make promises, and here is our promise. Any species that wants to leave the council and join the Terra Doctrine will be protected during their transition. Any attack on them will be considered an attack on Earth itself. She pulled out a datapad and began reading. The Terra Doctrine is simple. First, every species has the right to govern itself as it sees fit, as long as it doesn't harm others. Second, mutual defense is voluntary, not mandatory. Third, trade is based on mutual benefit, not council quotas. Fourth, technology is to be shared freely among all members, not hoarded by the powerful. That's anarchy, Thrix exclaimed. No, said Captain Vex of the Free Traders, speaking for the first time in a council chamber. That's freedom. We've traded with humans for 20 years. They've never cheated us, never threatened us, never demanded tribute. They trade fairly and defend fiercely. That's all we ever wanted. The holographic displays around the chamber suddenly activated without anyone touching them. They showed human colonies again, but this time with more detail. The defenses around each world weren't just platforms. They were entire ecosystems of protection. Minefields that repaired themselves. Sensor networks that could detect a ship from 10 light years away. And something else. Something that made the military experts in the room gasp. Are those... Glick started, his crystalline form pulsing with shock. Singularity weapons, Chen confirmed. Devices that can create controlled black holes. We developed them for mining, actually. But they work quite well for defense. That's impossible, the Vorthon ambassador said. The power requirements alone. Impossible for you, Chen corrected. Not for us. You see, while the Council spent centuries perfecting what you already had, we spent decades inventing what didn't exist. Every human child grows up learning that impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. The displays changed to show a document titled The Terra Doctrine, full text. It was being broadcast on every frequency, to every world in the galaxy. Not just Council worlds, but every inhabited planet, moon, and space station. What are you doing? The speaker demanded. Giving everyone a choice, Chen replied. For 1,000 years, species had two options. Join the Council or be isolated. Now they have a third option. Join the Terra Doctrine and be free. Even as she spoke, notifications began appearing on the Council's emergency boards. The Silk Weavers of Arachnia were requesting more information about the Terra Doctrine. The mining guilds of the Outer Rings were calling for a vote to leave the Council. The agricultural worlds were discussing whether human protection would be better than Council quotas. You're destroying everything, Korvac accused. No, Chen said firmly. We're offering an alternative. The Council can continue to exist. It can govern those who choose to be governed by it, but it can no longer force membership on those who want a different path. And if we refuse? Korvac's hand moved to his weapon. Chen didn't flinch. Then you'll lose anyway, just more violently. Admiral Kozlov has 800 ships positioned at strategic points throughout the galaxy. Not to attack, but to defend any world that requests our help. You can try to maintain your empire through force, but how many ships can you spare when your own members are questioning whether they want to stay? As if to emphasize her point, Ambassador Heck of the Vorthon Empire stood up. The Vorthon Empire formally requests time to consider the Terra Doctrine. The chamber erupted. The Vorthons were one of the Council's strongest military powers. If they were considering leaving, this is your doing, Thrix pointed at Chen. You've corrupted them with promises you can't keep. We've kept every promise we've made, Chen responded. Can the Council say the same? How many species were promised equality, but remained second-class members? How many were promised protection but abandoned when it became inconvenient? How many were promised prosperity but see their resources taken to feed the core worlds? Murmurs of agreement came from the gallery where the lesser members sat. Species that had been part of the Council for centuries but had never had a real voice. The speaker raised his staff for silence. When he spoke, his voice was tired, ancient, and sad. Ambassador Chen, you speak of freedom and choice. But what happens when that freedom leads to conflict? What happens when different systems clash? Then they clash, Chen said simply. And they resolve it themselves or they ask for mediation. But they don't have a distant council deciding their fate based on laws they had no part in making. She turned in a slow circle. looking at every member. The galaxy is vast. There's room for the Council and the Terra Doctrine, and probably a dozen other systems we haven't thought of yet. The question is whether you're wise enough to accept that. Never. Korvac drew his weapon, a plasma blade that hummed with deadly energy. The Order faction will never accept this chaos. We will fight. Chen sighed. She pressed a button on her wrist. Immediately, Korvac's weapon shut down. So did every other weapon in the chamber. The lights flickered, and for a moment everyone felt the artificial gravity waver. Please don't make us demonstrate again, Chen said quietly. We've shown remarkable restraint, but that patience is not infinite. Any attack on human space or our allies will be met with a response that will make the disabling of the Vorthan fleet look like a gentle warning. She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. You have 24 hours to give us your answer. Will the Council accept the existence of the Terra Doctrine as a legitimate alternative? Or will you force a confrontation that nobody will win? Wait, Elder Thum called out. If we accept, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't try to destroy the Council anyway? Chen smiled, and this time it was genuine. We don't want to destroy you. We want you to evolve. A council that species choose to join is stronger than one they're forced to join. Compete with us. Prove your system is better. Let species choose based on results, not threats. She gestured to the non-council representatives who had come with her. These species chose us not because we conquered them, but because we offered them something better. If the council can do the same, you'll thrive. If not, she shrugged. The door closed behind them, leaving the council in chaos. Members shouted at each other in 100 languages. Some called for war, others for peace, still others for time to think. The speaker looked at the timer Chen had started. 24 hours to make a decision that would reshape the galaxy. He thought of the predecessors who had chosen to disappear rather than adapt. Would the council make the same choice? In the middle of the chaos, a small notification appeared on his personal display. It was from a species called the Gardeners, one of the newest council members. They were requesting information about the Terra Doctrine. The exodus had already begun. The 24 hours were almost up. The council chamber was fuller than it had ever been. Not just the regular members, but observers from every corner of the galaxy. News drones hovered in the air, broadcasting to trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. History was being made, and everyone wanted to witness it. The council had split completely. The Order faction, now down to 31 species, stood firm with Korvac. They had spent the night planning what they called a preemptive strike to maintain galactic order. The Peace faction had grown to 52 members, with Elder Thum speaking for reconciliation. The rest remained undecided, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Admiral Kozlov's face appeared on the main display exactly as the deadline expired. Behind him, the bridges of 800 human warships could be seen, their crews calm and ready. Members of the Galactic Council, Kozlov began, his voice carrying across the stars. The time for decision has passed. What is your answer? The speaker stood slowly, his ancient joints protesting the movement. The Council remains divided. We cannot reach consensus. Then we'll make the decision simple, Kozlov replied. He pressed something off-screen and new images appeared. Human ships, but not warships. Colony vessels, cargo haulers, science ships. Thousands of them, all heading toward different systems. These ships carry a message to every world in the galaxy, Kozlov explained. Any species that wishes to join the Terra Doctrine may do so immediately. Any species that wishes to remain with the Council may do so. Any species that wishes to remain independent may do so. The choice is theirs, not yours. This is our moment, Korvac roared. He turned to the Order faction. Launch the attack. All ships converge on the human colonies. The Order faction members began transmitting commands to their fleets. On the displays, hundreds of warships started moving toward human space. The chamber held its breath. Then something unexpected happened. The warships stopped. Not disabled like the Vorthan fleet, just stopped. What's happening? Korvac demanded, frantically checking his command console. Messages began appearing from the Order faction fleets. Captain after captain, admiral after admiral, all saying variations of the same thing. We refuse to fire the first shot. Kozlov smiled grimly. Did you really think we've been idle this past week? We've been broadcasting directly to your military forces, showing them the truth about the Council's history, about the predecessors' warnings. about what this war would really mean. The main display shifted to show a young Altarian captain. "Ambassador Thrix," she said, addressing her own leader. "My crew has voted. We will not attack beings who have done us no harm. We joined the fleet to protect our people, not to enforce the Council's control over others." Similar messages poured in from across the Order faction fleets. Mutinies, but not violent ones. Just soldiers refusing to start a war they didn't believe in. "You corrupted them," Korvac accused, pointing at the display. "We told them the truth," Kozlov corrected, something the Council should have done long ago. But the real shock came next. The navigation systems of every Order faction ship suddenly activated on their own. The ships turned around and began heading home. "A little insurance," Kozlov explained. "We call it the Go Home Protocol. Any ship that attempts to attack human space or our allies will find itself returning to its planet of origin. The crews are unharmed, the ships undamaged. They just can't attack us. That's impossible," Glix protested. "You can't control our ships. We don't control them," a new voice said. Ambassador Chen appeared on another display, standing in what looked like a massive computer core. "We just asked them nicely to go home. You'd be amazed what machines will do if you know how to talk to them." The chamber was in chaos. The Order faction's military response had failed before it even began. But then something else happened that nobody expected. A small figure floated to the center of the chamber. It was Ambassador Pip from the Tiny Worlds, one of the newest and smallest council members. Her species was barely half a meter tall, often overlooked, frequently ignored. "I would like to speak," she said in a voice that was quiet but somehow carried throughout the chamber. The speaker nodded, grateful for any interruption to the chaos. "For 300 years, Pip began, my people have been members of this council. We joined because we had no choice. Join or be isolated, those were the options. We've watched as larger species made decisions for us, took resources from us, told us what was best for us." She paused, looking around the chamber. "Last week, humans visited our worlds. They didn't come with warships or demands. They came with a question. What do you need? No council member had ever asked us that before. They're manipulating you." Thrix insisted. "Perhaps," Pip agreed, "but they offered us defensive satellites that we control. They offered us trade agreements where we set the terms. They offered us technology that would let us travel the stars as equals, not dependents. If that's manipulation, it's kinder than the Council's protection has ever been." She took a breath. "The Tiny Worlds Federation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council and requests membership in the Terra Doctrine." The words seemed to break a dam. One by one, other species stood and made the same declaration. The Gentle Gardens, the Reef Builders, the Cloud Dancers, species that had been silent members for centuries suddenly found their voices. Within an hour, 43 species had left the council. The speaker watched his life's work crumble. But as he watched, he noticed something strange. The species leaving weren't angry or vindictive. They seemed relieved, as if a weight they hadn't realized they were carrying had been lifted. "It doesn't have to end this way," Elder Thum said quietly. He was speaking to both the speaker and the remaining council. "The council can still exist. It can still serve those who choose it, but it must accept that it's no longer the only option." Korvac stood defeated, his weapon useless, his faction broken. "This is the end of order in the galaxy." "No," Chen said from the display. "It's the beginning of a new kind of order, one based on choice, not force, on cooperation, not control." The displays around the chamber showed the galaxy as it now stood. The blue zones of council space, smaller but still substantial. The green zones of the Terra Doctrine, growing by the hour. The yellow zones of independent species, choosing neither side. And surprisingly, purple zones where council and Terra Doctrine species were already beginning to trade and cooperate. "You see?" Chen continued. "The galaxy is big enough for all of us. Your council can be stronger than ever if it focuses on those who want to be part of it, instead of wasting resources trying to control those who don't." The speaker looked at the fractured council, then at the galaxy map, then at the ancient staff he had carried for so long. Slowly, deliberately, he set it down. "The Galactic Council officially recognizes the Terra Doctrine as a legitimate governmental structure," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of history. "We acknowledge the right of species to choose their own path. We accept the new reality." Some members cheered. Others sat in stunned silence. Korvac and a few others walked out in disgust. Admiral Kozlov nodded respectfully. The Terra Doctrine recognizes the Galactic Council as a legitimate governmental structure. We look forward to peaceful coexistence and mutual prosperity, Chen added. Any council species that wishes to establish trade or cultural exchange with Terra Doctrine members is welcome. Any conflicts between our members can be resolved through joint mediation. The galaxy doesn't have to be divided. It can be diverse. Over the next few hours, the details were worked out. Border agreements, trade protocols, communication channels. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements. But for the first time in 1,000 years, species had choices. The free traders immediately set up new routes connecting both systems. The independent miners began selling to both sides. The nomad fleets became messengers and mediators between the two powers. A week later, the official galactic records were updated with a simple entry. On this date, the human refusal to negotiate changed the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. The age of single-system dominance ended. The age of choice began. Contrary to all predictions, the galaxy did not descend into chaos. Instead, it evolved. Ambassador Chen stood in her office on Earth's moon, looking at the stars. Admiral Kozlov joined her, bringing 2 cups of coffee. Did we win? He asked. Chen smiled. We didn't want to win. We wanted to be free. And now so is everyone else who wants to be. The Council will try again eventually. Old powers always do. Let them, Chen said. We'll be ready. We're humans. We don't negotiate from weakness. We don't accept chains no matter how golden. And we never ever give up. Outside, ships from a dozen different species arrived at Earth's new space station. Former Council members, Terra Doctrine allies, and independents all coming to trade, to learn, to share. The galaxy was more complex now, but also more alive. The panic that had gripped the Galactic Council was over. But the changes it had brought were just beginning. And somewhere in the void, if the old legends were true, the predecessors watched and nodded. Humanity had done what they couldn't, shown the galaxy that there was more than one way to reach the stars. The humans hadn't destroyed the old order.